Hello. I'm from a small firm in Santa Cruz, California, a company called Second Nature. I have a PhD in aquatic chemistry, and I've pretty much committed my career to trying to figure out how to get science to decision makers. So we've landed here on a geospatial decision support tool currently focused on urban stormwater management. So if you take away three things out of the next 20 minutes, the first is that sustainable management of urban stormwater is an opportunity, and currently a missed opportunity. That the Clean Water Act is the stick to chase the healthy ecosystem carrot, should you care about such things. And that geospatial accounting can support stormwater markets. I'm going to use data from the city of Salinas. This is a city, it's about 160,000 population. It's about 60 miles south of Silicon Valley. It is currently sitting over a severely overdrafted groundwater table. All of those colored areas are linking the urban landscape to the various waterways that it's draining to, that are all red because they all are listed on the 303D list as impaired with the EPA for multiple pollutants. And we're going to focus in on that blue drainage, urban drainage right there. So blowing that up, the land use, it's a single-family residential drainage. It's about 122 acres of imperviousness, and all severely economically disadvantaged, or about 60% of it. And all of that area drains out of this 5-foot outfall, or 4-foot, sorry. 4-foot outfall. And I'm going to show you this video. This was taken in November. The pipe currently is flowing at about 10 CFS. The preceding 24-hour rainfall was about 1.5 inches. 3 hours prior to this video, it was flowing at 37 CFS. And there's an audio here that makes it even more dramatic, but that's that 4-foot culvert. So this is the urban hydrograph. Right, it's flashy, it's powerful, it wreaks geomorphic havoc on these streams, and with it, it carries a large number of pollutants. Most visibly is urban litter, but there are a number of other urban pollutants associated, trace metals, hydrocarbons, pesticides, etc. So needless to say, this is an opportunity, right, to improve the biological, chemical, and physical quality of our receiving waters by better managing this water. So that stick, it's called MS4 NPDES permit. MS4 isn't really important, but NPDES stands for Non-Point Source Discharge Elimination System. That title has done a disservice, I think, to this permit. It's been around for about 25 years. And the non-point source, the approach that people take to comply with these, is a landscape scale, large scale approach, which we're thinking is probably better served by doing it at a spatially explicit scale. The regulations come down from the EPA to the states, different state agencies, and then get passed on to every city, county, and university in the country. And then within those, that 12,000 is those public landowners, but then there are also hundreds of thousands of private landowners and developers, et cetera. The intent of this regulation is to mitigate the urban landscape on the local waterways, the quality of the waterways. The status quo and the way that these permittees demonstrate compliance is by generating a large amount of information in checklists, tables, spreadsheets, disparate plans and studies, and they submit annual reports that are pretty inaccessible and fairly dense. And our client in the city of Salinas has said this is where her data goes to die. So we're helping them be more efficient while also making better decisions. This is a nice little addition to the stick or carrot that came out of the EPA just this month, which is kind of cool. Promote market-based mechanisms for improving water quality. So to have a market, we need accounting systems. And that's what we've been working on, is this accounting, and I'm going to show you how that works. So the first is this hydrogeographic context. As I mentioned, linking the urban landscape to the waterways to which they drain. Simple, standardized mapping approach using terminology. It's not very hard to do. Anybody with GIS skills can do it, or our staff. And just leveraging best available data, both gray infrastructure as well as topography, land use, et cetera. And this serves as basically the foundation of now a geospatial organization. So if we care about how effective this program is, right, they're going to manage all their information, we're going to give them better data to be a little bit smarter, and I'll show you how to do that. But if we really want to look at how effective reducing that impact coming out of this pipe and being discharged to the receiving waters, powerful metrics are reductions in runoff and reductions in pollutants coming out of that pipe. We are focusing very specifically, which is very different than the entire way that the field goes, is at this interface. There's millions of dollars annually that are spent by cities and counties scooping water out of the receiving water, analyzing for every pollutant you can imagine, and putting those in tables, which is valuable. It's valuable data on the quality of the receiving waters, but the intent of those is to help them understand how effective their program is, and there's this lack of identification of that signal. So really going to this particular point in space, and then doing it on an average annual basis. We have wet years and dry years. We have big events, small events. That natural hydrologic variability is pretty intense on water quality, and trying to extract that out so that we can really isolate this signal. So because we can't measure everywhere all the time, we need models. And the way that urban hydrology and pollutant loading modeling has been done for at least the last decade or more, they borrowed from a lot of infrastructure sizing type of models that are continuous simulations. So high representation of the temporal distribution of the data, but again, at that kind of lumped land use scale. And so we created a urban hydrology and pollutant loading methodology, more purpose-built for this. And we published it in the journal Environmental Management. Generally, what we do is we pre-process the precipitation such that we just take a frequency distribution of the percentile of the events, multiply it by the number of days it rains, we get back to that average annual, and now we're using 5 data points instead of hundreds of thousands. And then we preserve and trade off that temporal resolution with the spatial resolution. And there's lots of, obviously, data out there. So the things that are most influence runoff transformation, and we go back to 1970 USDA curve number type of approaches, is soils, imperviousness, and land cover. So at a 30 by 30 meter grid, we can estimate the average annual runoff without a municipality or city or doing anything, just based on the land cover. If we want to go to pollutants, we can do a land use type of distribution, relying on existing data, and whether it's PCBs, nitrogen, particulate pollutants, and come up with characteristic runoff concentrations on the landscape scale as well. And that gets us to a load. So the first thing that we did after we figured out we could do this on a grid scale is we said, well, stormwater is not getting a lot of traction in this one water vision, right? Water, waste, water supply, wastewater, stormwater. And so we figured we'd just quantify how much there was in California. So we did this in a story map. That's the link. And just did that 30 by 30 meter grid, aggregated all over the entire state for all the cities and counties that are out there. And there's over 2 million acre feet per year. That's a lot of, that's real water. And I'll make it even a little more real. So now we can aggregate those pixels for any municipality. So we're here in Redlands, in likely what we might call a desert, but there's still 2,300 acre feet per year generated in rain into the urban landscape. To give that some context, a family should be able to use somewhere about 1/4 of an acre foot per year, so that's about 10,000 families. Not that we capture it all, but we can better use it to, again, mitigate the impacts of the stormwater on the local waterways. And the green map is the DWR groundwater basins. And so Redlands is sitting over 100% of that land is on a particular groundwater basin. So we, again, Geospatial Decision Support Tool, we have 36 municipalities using this. This is now the city of Salinas in here, and we've taken that grid, aggregated it for the city of Salinas. It's about 5,000 acre feet. That's about a little over a third of their potable water demand for the city. And then what we've mapped here is we've lumped them by urban catchments and divided them by their area, and then just showing them in quantiles. So again, trying to get science to decision makers, the dark blue areas, a greater opportunity to manage stormwater as a resource. Go do stuff in these blue areas and be able to now communicate it to city council, managers, et cetera. And we do the same thing for urban particulate pollutants here, same concept. All right, so what's an effective stormwater program? There essentially can boil down to 3 tools in the toolbox. The first is source control, whether it's hydrologic or pollutant. So when the rain lands on a parcel or a road, if that water doesn't ever get generated into runoff and is put back into the ground, that would be hydrologic source control. Or we can ban pollutants, ban paper bags or copper and brake pads, et cetera, just get them out of the environment. A little more difficult to quantify, but really valuable. We can do ground control. So once those pollutants get on the surface, can we get them up before it rains? Litter control programs, or this highly undervalued mobile best management practice that is pretty cost-effective way to get urban pollutants back up before it rains. And then typically where a lot of our solutions and our public dollars and private investment have gone are in these structural treatments. So we build some sort of a structure that intercepts, captures water, and whether it infiltrates it or it filters it, it reduces the volumes or the concentrations before that water continues on as surface water to the receiving water. So how do we quantify that? The first is for source control or ground control. I'll just give one example, but we've been for years creating these rapid condition assessments. We want them to be precise across users. We want them to be repeatable. And we want them to be efficient as possible as far as collecting the data. So now we're at the site scale. We bring in parcel layers so we can manage the information at the APN level. And a lot of the redevelopment or new development requirements that end up in planning, they're across the country, in California as well, is for developers to capture or treat some sort of a design storm on that parcel. In California, it's the 85th percentile. So in this instance, the hydrologic control of a parcel, we term it runoff neutral. But is there a simple way to be able to evaluate whether there's any water leaving in pipe, channel, or sheet flow, right? However it's done, whatever happens, can we actually retain that volume or reduce that volume coming off of that parcel? One parcel, not a big deal, but now if we go to this catchment scale and we implement them intensively, all we're doing in the computation is ratcheting down the curve number a little bit, but now we can actually expect a delayed response in the runoff at the end of the pipe, as well as the reduction in the volume and the peak flows. On the structural side, these are green infrastructure asset management systems. We call this BMPRAM, Rapid Assessment Method. The first one we created in 2008, and now it's embedded in the Lake Tahoe crediting program, trying to keep Tahoe blue. This is how the cities and counties demonstrate that they're actually making progress in a performance-based system. A typology, any one of these structures, you and I can go out, we look at the same thing, we call it the same type, one of 16 types based on those processes in different combination. Then doing visual assessments, or some actually measurements, but rapid and repeatable. And again, can train anyone in here to do this in a day. We use those observations in different combinations depending upon the type, and what we're doing is basically mapping or tracking the trajectory of each specific structure from the condition it was when it went in, either either installed or maintained, and then if these things work, they get water, they clog, they grow vegetation, et cetera. And again, in the permits, what do you have, where is it, are you inspecting it, are you maintaining it? And right now, most of the municipalities across the country don't really have a good handle on that. So we go beyond the box texting. Now we're putting this information into a geospatial management system the stormwater managers have this at their fingertips. They can report to the regulator through read-only access and sharing of information, show that they're complying with the regulations. But then we do this accounting. So if we're going to go to performance-based type of an accounting rather than check boxes and lists, we need to have some sort of a quantified benefit. So starting with no implementation, that baseline concept based on land use, soils, distribution, et cetera, and we can generate a baseline load, layer in those different types of ground source control, ground control, and structural controls. We run the same precipitation, so we're isolating the signal of the management action, and we have a delta. So now these groups, again, there's 3 dozen in California right now, trying to figure out a go-to-market strategy and spending a lot of time figuring out how to message this. But so starting with no baseline, get the information in there. As soon as they put in the mapping, this comes out, has a prioritization map, which is critical for any sort of regional or even internal prioritization and planning. And put it up at city council member discussions. They can show it to funders. They can show it to their community and start gaining interest. First year, they've really just been getting their data into the system. Where are their existing assets? What do they have? How far have they gotten? Which is not surprising, not very far. That's across the board. We haven't been very effective, thus the quality of our urban streams. But now over time, we have a way to communicate quantitatively the value of those investments and the change over time and inform market-based type of an urban land management trading system. And we can adapt, right? If something doesn't work and we tried it and the changes aren't there, we can adapt. So all of this is modeled estimates, but that first site that I was showing you, that's a measured estimate, so we're validating these modeled estimates with measured, which is going well in another talk. So the 3 takeaways, we can do a lot more with our urban land management strategies to better use urban stormwater as a resource and protect the quality, improve the quality of our urban waterways and streams. There's a nice balance between the Clean Water Act and this desired end member of a healthy aquatic ecosystem. And I think there's a great opportunity to make a lot of progress. And we need some sort of an accounting to actually make progress and implement kind of viable markets, if you will. We all need to agree on what that measure is. So this platform, we've been in the Esri startup program for a little over a year and continuing to build out the product and the solution. So thank you.